If we want to understand Explorers of Sky, and Pokémon Mystery Dungeon as a whole, we need to talk about Sharpedo Bluff. That is, we have to understand why Sharpedo Bluff is such an immediately enrapturing set piece. Its first moment in the game, lightning echoing against the mouth of the cave, revealing an assortment of rocky teeth lined against the cavity's ridges, certainly gives the bluff an imposing quality. It's the kind of threatening yet fantastical structure you wouldn't normally see in a mainline Pokémon, a series which mostly consists of stereotypical, yet beautiful nonetheless, vistas of nature, industrialized cities and towns, and quaint suburbs. In mainline Pokémon games, exotic buildings look more like the spawn of auteur museum architects, utilizing the land around them as their blank canvas. Things aren't quite so similar in the world of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon. In the sub-series, the land itself seems to be an architect all on its own. It is baked into the premise of Mystery Dungeon. Each entry contrives a new reason why the titular dungeons, warped pockets of space where treasures often appear, are being spontaneously generated throughout the world. Exploration teams are needed in a world like Mystery Dungeon because the world is literally a self-providing dispenser of mysterious locations. Likewise, Pokémon Mystery Dungeon's final dungeons are really just enlarged forces of nature. Billowing sky towers, hulking great glaciers, rotting trees. There's no indication anyone built these places. Rather, they've simply existed like this since the beginning of time. Even Temporal Tower, living on a floating landmass in between folds of space, is decidedly ambiguous. Old ruins in the Hidden Land suggest there used to be some kind of civilization living here, but we never learn anything about them. Did they construct the tower, or the time gears which hold it in place? It's impossible to say. Yet, the flow of time is inexorably connected to the tower, so it's entirely possible that structures like Temporal Tower, or indeed Sharpedo Bluff, are simply natural formations created by the world itself, rather than any one Pokemon's spur-of-the-moment construction project. Explorers in particular is transfixed at pointing out these unique locales. Fogbound Lake is a giant pool of water sitting at a high elevation, atop a single spindly spire of rock. At its peak is a spout of gushing water, illuminated in part by a complex set of colors provided from the Illumise flying around it. At the beach under Treasure Town, Krabby come out to blow bubbles across the shoreline of the beach. The world of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon does a good job using the features of the Pokémon themselves to amplify the unique aspects of each environment. This more naturalistic approach extends to the less natural set pieces as well. Wigglytuff's guild is a prime example. The partner exclaims in awe about going underground, yet still being able to look outside. Chatot explains that the guild was built into the side of a cliff. After all, why build something ourselves when the planet has already done most of the work? And even when Mystery Dungeon does present us with a manually built town or two, there's no pattern or standardization to their layouts. You're unlikely to find a factory or smokestack in even the busiest of towns in the Mystery Dungeon universe. And not all guilds are going to look or be organized like Wigglytuff's. But I've thus far been talking very literally. The Pokémon Mystery Dungeon series expresses a sort of anything goes mentality far beyond its naturally and unnaturally devised wonders. The idea applies just as much to the social structure of the setting. In Mystery Dungeon, there's no sense of nation-states or governance or citizenship. The world is composed merely of dispersed collections of peoples. In the guild, we see notices posted about an Exploration Team Federation, a fairly innocuous organization which provides members with supplies and occasionally posts requests towards relevant guilds. The Federation is, at least in Explorer's case, the only established institution in the world at large, but it seems more like a loose coalition of guilds than it does an official ruling body, located in a specific place with a strict societal framework to abide by. Though there are apparently police, they operate within the purview of the guild and with express collaboration from its appointed members and exploration teams. One could easily imagine that Happy from Gates to Infinity is just another initiative sponsored by the Federation, and that the Expedition Society from Super Mystery Dungeon is just another member of this same organization. All of which is to say that the peoples living within the Mystery Dungeon series are relatively unburdened by regulation and contract. Want to build a house? Don't worry about taxes or policy. Acquiring a no-strings-attached land deed is nothing more than a simple exchange of Poke. Want to be a citizen of Treasure Town? Just start living there. Really, who's gonna ask? And so, Sharpedo Bluff brings to mind a certain kind of lawless, swashbuckling adventure. befitting of a setting where we spend most of the time trekking across the most remote and mysterious corners of the universe. Internal world building isn't the only kind of structure that matters, though. How the series constructs itself as a game and a story is also highly relevant to understanding Mystery Dungeon's appeal. I've discussed before how I think long intros serve to build an unparalleled internal investment in a game, with Super Mystery Dungeon as the primary use case. But while Super represents the most extreme kind of long intro, the truth is that all of the Mystery Dungeon games utilize a very particular narrative structure. Most of the story is backloaded into the final third of the game, usually punctuated by some significant plot twist which results in a fundamental shift to the status quo. It's extremely easy to identify where these points are located. Being chased out of Pokémon Square in Rescue Team, being taken into the Time Portal in Explorers, Muna's betrayal in Gates, and being sent to the Voidlands in Super. This aspect is, in my estimation, the singular most effective tool in Mystery Dungeon's storytelling arsenal. The sudden shift in character dynamics is a system shock, and it works so well paradoxically because of the utter mundanity of the tasks that precede it. There's a temptation to gloss over the story which happens before these critical points as largely unimportant, but that wouldn't really be a compliment to these games. In Explorer's case, suggesting the story doesn't begin in earnest until being shot towards the future means skipping over 14 of the game's 20 chapters, and I can't imagine recommending a story where I would consider 2/3 of it to be irrelevant, at least not holistically. In that sense, Mystery Dungeon games are made in how they build up to those third act heel turns. Explorers gets a lot of mileage in establishing the bureaucracy of Wigglytuff's guild. There's a very strict order to things. The chain of command is clear, with Wigglytuff in charge and Chatot, his right-hand bird, dutifully relaying the guildmaster's wishes to the lowly apprentices that comprise the rest of the guild. The functioning day-to-day follows a regimented pattern. Apprentices are to wake up, line in formation at the guild hall, listen to opening remarks, then carry out their assigned task until dinner in the evening. Rinse and repeat. Loudred acts as the alarm bell to ensure none of the apprentices sleep in each morning. Failure or misbehavior is dealt with decisively, incurring an eating penalty during dinner. It's like the Pokémon version of boot camp. Duties in the guild most often involve taking missions from the request boards on sub-level 1. When new requests arrive, Dugtrio enters tunnels behind the boards and swaps out the old requests. Our labor for completing said assignments isn't so handsomely rewarded. The guild takes a 90% cut off of any client's payment following the successful completion of their request. Look, operational costs are high, okay? Guilds don't fund themselves. Occasionally, we'll be asked to help out with sentry duty, a tunnel security system used to identify the species of incoming Pokémon by examining their footprint. Drill Sergeant Chatot personally reviews our performance after the duty shift is completed. Naturally, apprentices and their comrade in arms incur some of those eating penalties for poor performance. Explorers even finds time to establish little guild traditions. To facilitate new recruits, the guild gives an expedition request to visit the nearby waterfall, on account of receiving intel about a secret that may be located near it. The intel is completely bogus, of course. With leaps of faith, water rapids, and a secret hot spring, the expedition is supposed to make rookie teams feel good about exploring, by giving them an unmitigated success. The guild's plan is ruined on account of our dimensional scream ability, letting us peek into time and view the route Wigglytuff took when he first embarked into the waterfall cave. When our partner asks to confirm if we were sent to a location already discovered by Wigglytuff, Chatot bemoans to himself about the team wanting to spoil their own discovery. These details are key in realizing Wigglytuff's guild as an actual place in time and space. The fake expedition reveals insight into the overriding philosophy of the guild. Becoming an exploration team is grueling work, sure, but it's also supposed to be something gratifying. Smiles may go for miles, but that shouldn't just be true for the clients. The smiles are for the exploration teams as well. The rules, regulations, and functional operation of the place gives context to the game as a whole. Fulfilling a request on the board isn't a discrete segment in a video game. It exists as part of an integrated system to process the churn of apprentices into fully fledged autonomous teams. It's simply a matter of immersion. But what exactly are we being immersed in? Outside of mandatory guild-wide explorations, Explorers sticks very staunchly to this pattern, as do other mystery dungeons with their respective premises. If Super was intent on making us relive the glory days of going to elementary school, Explorers spends the first 10 hours wanting us to feel the daily grind of a 9-to-5 job. Wait, but the school was a step too far for this series? This fixation pays dividends in the long run. Because Mystery Dungeon games utilize much of its runtime to establish procedure, in many cases literally contextualizing the gameplay as a job, it makes the subsequent status quo shift all the more jarring. The game hasn't raised the stakes just because the story has become more pressing. It does so because it disrupts the routine that has thus far formed the backbone of the game. It effectively fulfills the premise the first 2/3 have been setting up. You've trained all this time to go out on expeditions, so now your final test is to chart territory unknown, without any guild support or guardrails for safety. From here on out, you play by the rules of the dead beyond, not the guild. Mystery Dungeon games essentially work like negative afterimages generated by the retina. The longer you look at an image, the more stark the contrasting colors will be when shifting your eyes away. Similarly, journeying through the Paralyzed planet is suitably impactful only because explorers spent so much time looking at the routine of the guild beforehand. Importantly, this status quo change isn't a momentary shift. After traversing through several dungeons in the future, befriending Grovyle, and managing to take a portal back to the present, it becomes important to find a hiding spot back in Treasure Town, lest we be discovered by the guild or the town's residents. After all, Grovyle is a wanted outlaw, and we're not exactly supposed to be in the present anymore. So where do we make camp next? Why, none other than Sharpedo Bluff. We may have returned from the darkness, but the game makes clear that this is no return to form. Our journey across time has irrevocably changed the course of the game. Gone are the days of familiars sleeping in the guild, the rude awakenings, and the morning debriefings. Though this encampment proves only temporary, as we eventually choose to reveal ourselves to the guild, it prefigures how the area will be used later. The Bluff is more formally established as the new base of operations in the postgame, after passing the guild's final exam and becoming an officially designated exploration team. It's a trick that's as simple as it is effective. Rather than just tell you the status quo has changed, the game offers a more tangible way to feel it. In much the same way that the bureaucracy of the guild added clarity in how the actions you spend most of the game doing fit into the broader tapestry of the world, so too does the removal of those now familiar trappings. It is perhaps sad that the new camp in the Bluff has no unique charms or bureaucracy of its own, but it at the very least exemplifies the ambivalence of becoming your own boss. There's no one to tell you what to do, but there's also a kind of isolation, no community or camaraderie to be a part of anymore. Super will, in my opinion, use this same trick even more effectively in the transition from Serene Village to Lively Town, replacing one set of norms and characters with another. In this way, Sharpedo Bluff isn't just an interesting sight to look at, it also acts as the game's de facto indicator of evolution, a representation of the appealing structure of Mystery Dungeon games. We've yet to tell the complete story of Sharpedo Bluff. The location is connected to a very specific character. The partner mentions on approach to the cliff face, "This is where I lived before I joined the guild." It's little surprise that, like basically every other Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, the partner is essentially the main character. Sharpedo Bluff represents more than a token relation to the partner. While it was his home, he's quick to express relief that it has not been tampered with since his last visit, noting that nobody takes any notice of this place. It's also little surprise, given his description of the Bluff, that Explorers finds the partner's cowardice the most intriguing aspect about him. For most of the game, the partner acts as if he would prefer no one take any notice of him. The first scene of the partner is him struggling to psych himself up just before entering the guild. Fittingly, the partner gets cold feet once he's been detected by Diglett. The mere acknowledgement of his existence by someone else is enough to frighten him away. Team Skull repeatedly belittles the partner for being a wimp, stealing his precious keepsake without pushback, and failing to stand up for himself when they start yanking him around in the guild. The partner has to be talked into jumping through the waterfall after the player character receives a vision of Wigglytuff doing it. But this playground bullying and general hesitancy isn't really what the game is getting at when it calls the partner a coward. There's a much more severe issue at play. The nature of the partner's cowardice deals with an internal sense of self, or rather the lack thereof. A missing moral compass and North Star the partner can use to not only make informed decisions, but to make informed decisions he can personally have confidence in. information. Time and time again, the partner simply accepts or rejects information given to him based solely on the perceived reputation of the individual relaying that information. Rarely does he seem to consider the merit and authenticity of the information itself. The most obvious and pressing example is Dusk Noir. Dusk Noir enters the scene with a suave, gentlemanly grace. When the partner asks who Dusk Noir is, the guild members immediately start gassing him up, speaking about how impressive it is he ventures on solo expeditions, how knowledgeable he is about the world and its peoples, how amazing that he claimed the title of a famous explorer out of nowhere, like a comet. All of the guild members constantly add the modifier great to his name when speaking about him. Respectful, thoughtful, well-spoken, he even helps the guild out by brainstorming solutions to the whole time gear dilemma. What's not to like? The partner instantly eats the facade up, treating Dusk Noir as an object of admiration for the following few chapters. The play works completely. Dusk Noir is even able to convince the residents of Treasure Town within a single conversation that he and Grovyle are both from the future, and that he is attempting to stop Grovyle's stealing of the time gear and ultimate destabilizing of the flow of time. Of course, in the least surprising twist ever, Dusk Noir's account is a lie. Grovyle may be an outlaw from the future, but only because Dusk Noir is the stooge to a mad ruler from a dystopian ruin. Guess the guild forgot the secret 11th rule: never trust a Mon whose footprint can't be identified. After being kidnapped into the future and avoiding execution by Sableye, Grovyle attempts to explain the truth of the situation. But the partner is having none of it. So smitten by his perception of what Dusk Noir is supposed to be, he rejects Grovyle's story out of hand and marches off to get Dusk Noir's version of the story. Grovyle doesn't have much credibility in his eyes. They did just spend several expeditions trying to track him down as a criminal after all, so his narrative of events can be completely discarded. Thus, the partner's issue is more of an issue of trust than it is one of bravery. Trust is based on having incomplete information, but how can we discern who is worth listening to in the first place? Grovyle essentially presses the issue. After the partner becomes overwhelmed on deciding who to trust, Grovyle slaps some sense into him. You decided that you would decide for yourself. You insisted that because you don't know what to believe, you won't accept words for their face value, and you'd think for yourself. Think for yourself, then act as you deem right. Grovyle advocates for the partner to do the one thing he has refused to do since the beginning: develop an internal barometer from which to judge the effectiveness of his decisions. Explorers repeatedly parallels Grovyle and the partner in this way. It's revealed that, like our partner, we also once traveled alongside Grovyle, before having our memories erased in an accident traveling across time. The partner and Grovyle reflect on how the player had a profound impact on each of their lives, with Grovyle even suggesting the partner should take his place when leaving for the future one final time. Despite Grovyle's harsher cadence, the game makes him out to be just as eager to place his faith in others as the partner is. In the Ice Mountains, Grovyle asks some passerby Snowrunt a few questions. When getting close to them, the Snowrunt assault Grovyle, giggling all the way back to the mountain. Grovyle becomes frustrated that he was tricked, prompting Dusk Noir to be surprised by how innocent he is. It's the kind of bullying very reminiscent of what the partner endured when confronted by Team Skull. Yet the difference between Grovyle and the partner is that Grovyle has a far more developed sense of integrity. He knows exactly what he wants and how best to get it. Grovyle repeatedly shows he is a good judge of character. Despite the teasing, Grovyle insists that he continue to ask the Snowrunt for help. Grovyle spends a good portion of his time with Dusk Noir contemplating the situations in which Dusk Noir will certainly betray him, and when it will be safe to accompany him, assessing the risk of each scenario, and basing his decision on the outcome of that rationale. Grovyle correctly intuits that Dusk Noir's mind can be changed in aiding Primal Dialga, even if it takes a few electrical shocks to get there. Grovyle abandons the partner and the player after the partner casts doubt on his tale of events, insisting that a partnership without any semblance of trust would be a waste of time. It is only when the partner decides for himself to extend an ounce of trust to Grovyle that he then decides to join us. Grovyle is not a character blindly led by the whims of the latest thing someone told him. He is a character who is first and foremost motivated by his own desires, who can think about past, present, and future experiences to come to the best course of action without regret. He has little time for someone of less conviction. in building a model of exemplary trust and how to do it. Explorers highlights its concern with the partner's flaky disposition. The game wants to argue, ultimately, that if a credible enough source were to tell the partner to jump off a bridge, he might seriously consider doing it. In the post-game, a credible enough source tells the partner to jump off a bridge, and he seriously considers doing it. At the Luminous Spring, a place in which Pokémon are able to evolve, the spring rejects us on account of a distortion in the fabric of space. Later, in our dreams, Cresselia weaves a compelling tale about how the partner in the player's sojourn through time has caused significant damage to space-time, resulting in even larger breaches in reality. Her prescription for this problem is that we should simply kill ourselves to stop the distortions. At the same time, a resident of Treasure Town falls victim to a permanent nightmare. Within the nightmare, Cresselia tells us that this dark realm is a direct consequence of our continued existence and the widening of the breaches. This leads to an extended sequence atop Sharpedo Bluff, where the partner debates whether they should follow through with Cresselia's proposed solution. It is a magnified and twisted version of the same dilemma that Dusknoir offered in the base game. Will the partner be ensnared in yet another trap because he uncritically accepted what he was told? As anticipated, the partner immediately takes Cresselia's side, arguing that finding out about us being the cause of the distortions independently at Luminous Spring adds points to her credibility. But as things look hopeless, the player is able to put things into perspective. Cresselia's story is not impossible per se, but there's no evidence to support it. No conclusive reason to think that the distortions will disappear after we're gone. This seems to spur something within the partner. The player trekking alongside him gave him a resolve that hadn't existed before. The partner has no desire to end his own life. So if it's not absolutely clear what the implications of that choice will be, why go through with it just because some dream figure said so? With a little help from the player, the partner is able to think for himself, then act as he deems right, not what someone else deems right, and our intuition is rewarded. Cresselia turns out to be a charlatan, a costume worn by Darkrai to do his dirty work for him. It took an entire game to get there, but finally the partner was able to show an act of bravery. On one calm evening, Wigglytuff decides to tell Chatot the origins of how he came to acquire his precious Defend Globe. Once upon a time, a pre-evolved Wigglytuff went on dangerous expeditions in parts unknown as an apprentice to a local Armaldo living in hiding. It became very apparent why Armaldo was hiding. He was a wanted criminal. Wigglytuff, at that moment, doesn't really seem to care though. In fact, it means next to nothing to him. Of course, there are lots of outlaws in this world. They are caught and punished, but truly bad Pokémon don't really exist anywhere. Armaldo may have been an outlaw, but it can't change the honesty of their relationship. Wigglytuff is very consistent on this point, and seeks to embody it himself. After discovering the Time Gear in Fogbound Lake, Yuxi demands that the guild keep its location a secret on account of the recent burglaries. Wigglytuff makes a solemn promise to uphold the lake's secret, evidenced further by his and the guild's lack of disclosure about it to Dusknoir later. But when Grovyle eventually steals the Time Gear at the lake, Wigglytuff becomes furious. Though it quickly becomes clear that no one inside the guild leaked the information, it nevertheless sullies the name of the guild. To Yuxi, his generosity of showing the water spout was rewarded with betrayal. The guild quickly decides to catch Grovyle as recompense for this perceived backstabbing. There are no bad Pokémon, and Wigglytuff certainly won't allow his guild to be viewed that way. Explorers is very much aligned with Wigglytuff's perspective. If there's one sentiment Explorers really wants you to understand, it's that there's no such thing as a bad Pokémon. In the early parts of the chapter, Drowsy spends his time kidnapping children to do manual labor for him. In the postgame, when given the opportunity to help Azurill out of his permanent sleep, he jumps at the chance, wondering if doing this would ever make up for his crime. When Meryl's water float gets stolen and brought to the Ant Plains, we're attacked by a pack of Manectric and Electrike. After a scuffle, Dusknoir attempts to defuse the situation, making sure to place the interaction into context. The Manectric were a nomadic tribe who once suffered great losses due to trespassers in the Ant Plains, and now seek to protect their territory against future incursions. Team Skull, the one who placed the float in the plains knowing it would start a conflict, are repeatedly shown to be a rotten bunch. They harass the young, they harass the elderly, they cheat and steal frequently, even getting us into trouble for a job they wrecked in the Apple Woods. A foul odor literally descends over Treasure Town upon their arrival, in case it wasn't already obvious. Yet even Team Skull is given a moment of sobriety. In Brine Cave, after getting wiped out by mysterious assailants, Skuntank willingly gives back the relic fragment he stole from us and implores us to rescue Chatot before the assailants catch him too. Coughing and Zubat praise their team leader for letting the bad guy persona slip a little at the end there, and Team Skull never troubles us again. Explorers engages in the very optimistic outlook that people are fundamentally good, and that rehabilitation is always worth trying. Shaman in the Mountain Expedition storyline is based very openly on this optimism. Sky Peak was constructed by the Shaman for the express purpose of being a collaborative effort between explorer teams. Shaman gives positive reinforcement when you give items to other Pokemon climbing up the mountain. A survey team constructs lifts at various checkpoints up the mountain to help other passing teams. Special items, only found on Sky Peak, contain something when given to someone else, but contain absolutely nothing if you open them yourself. Shaman becomes very upset when hostilities break out, destroying the cooperative spirit of the climb. Naturally, both the situations with the Carnivine and Grimer turn out to be little more than easily resolvable misunderstandings. Shaman imagines the explorer teams climbing the mountain to be just as picturesque as the view from Sky Peak's summit. 2-bit villains of the week aren't the only types of characters Explorers extends its generosity towards. The few remaining in the Paralyzed future are consistently characterized as mere products of their environment. When a spirit tomb shackles Grovyle and attacks us, the partner confidently declares it a bad Pokemon. Grovyle denies the partner's allegation, citing simple anger as the reason for its hostility. There are many such Pokemon here in your future. They are Pokemon who should be good, but they have become bitter and twisted because of this world's perpetual darkness. It's a sentiment later echoed by Dusknoir, noting that the attitudes of the Pokemon living in this world are a bit warped. With time made a useless mockery, the being of time loses himself completely. Primal Dialga is nothing more than a husk, capable of no more than gurgles and grunts, desiring no higher thing except the continuity of existence. In the paralyzed planet of the future, it is only natural that those remaining should succumb to anger. When time stopped, the momentary problems of today became the ever-present realities of tomorrow. The tiny cracks in our lives were ripped open, but couldn't be closed. With the inextricable flow of reality ceased, time can heal no wounds. Dusknoir is emblematic of this dead future. Dusknoir sides with Primal Dialga for a similar reason. To change the future would mean to erase its current remaining inhabitants, stopping the comforting continuity of existence. Dusknoir finds the very idea intolerable. Yet he's able to make another intriguing observation about Grovyle during the Snowrunt incident. That, somehow, Grovyle's innocence is what prevents him from being influenced by the power of darkness. The evidence seems to bear out. Grovyle isn't quick to lash out like most of his futuristic peers. Why is that? Born from the same paralysis, why did Dusknoir and Grovyle turn out so different? Wigglytuff rather fittingly sums up the idea, stating that every Pokemon in the world exists for a reason, even the ones that mean harm to others. Put another way, everyone has a reason for the way they are, and if we can understand that reason, we'll understand their actions in a more empathetic context. This begins to explain the difference. Having been exposed to the present time, Grovyle is the one person in the future who can imagine an unparalyzed world. He is immune to the darkness's influence because he has a reason to live, a course of action to abide by beyond existing for its own sake. On the other hand, Dusknoir only wants to continue living precisely because he has nothing to live for. But while Primal Dialga is an emotionless shell, Dusknoir still retains a sense of reason. This forms the basis of Grovyle's intuition. If that reason can be altered and given a new hope, surely any being with an ounce of self-respect would abandon such a meaningless plan. And indeed, once given a reason, Dusknoir terminates his allegiance with Primal Dialga. In the end, Dusknoir and Grovyle really aren't much different at all. This is why Explorers concerns itself so much with a partner's absent conviction. For Explorers, there is nothing worse than lacking this all-encompassing drive. To be led solely by the whims of the loudest person in the room is to be little different than primal dialga, a homunculus in motion, that the partner, lacking in willpower and resolve, would easily succumb to the darkness that controls the future simply because he doesn't have a better reason not to. No greater goal than to drift in and out of each day. Explorers would rather have the partner who embarrasses himself at the foot of Wigglytuff's guild than the partner who spends eternity hoveled away inside Sharpedo Bluff. Which is why I struggle to think of a worse villain for explorers to conclude with than Darkrai. While the entire game suggests to us that conflicts are often the result of misunderstandings, and that bad actions are done by those who haven't yet imagined being any other way, Darkrai is just cartoonishly evil. He wants to complete Primal Dialga's plan and envelop the world in darkness because Explorers fails to recognize that Darkrai is an entirely different beast than anything the game has shown us before. Primal Dialga didn't challenge the game's thesis because the game didn't consider him to be a sentient being, and it certainly didn't provide any evidence contrary to that fact. Accordingly, the regular sentient Dialga is a perfectly chill dude, but Darkrai is different. He is sentient, and he's just evil. He is arguably the only character in the entire Pokémon Mystery Dungeon series who could be described as such. I mean, really, this is a series where even the manifestation of darkness and hatred itself is not pure evil. This cannot be said to be the game challenging its own philosophy, that maybe there are in fact bad Pokémon, purely evil Pokémon who cannot be redeemed, because Darkrai never forces our heroes to adapt nor reevaluate the argument at hand. The game basically admits this when the ending states even that Darkrai has a meaningful reason to exist. This suggests the game sees Darkrai as reaffirming the point that there is no true evil, that even the most monstrous of people bring some intangible value with them. But then, what is that reason? What is Darkrai's reason, other than to be the uncharacteristically big bad at the end of the hour? The game just claims that there is one, fully incorporating him within the previously established idea as is, alongside characters like Dusknoir and Team Skull, without doing any of the work necessary to make it coherent. We're never given any good explanation as to why we should think this is possible. If Darkrai's only purpose in life is to bring despair to the entire world, is it really unreasonable to say that shouldn't be allowed to exist? The game doesn't have an answer to this question, solving the problem in the end by making Darkrai lose all of his memories. Isn't that basically admitting the old Darkrai was unsalvageable? It's a rather callous solution in a game that is otherwise able to find the best in everyone. I highly doubt Shaman would approve. While standing on Sharpedo Bluff, Grovyle and the partner catch the early sunrise. For Grovyle, seeing the sunrise for the first time changed everything. It became a beacon of hope, a symbol of the future he was trying to build for himself. In keeping with the idea of the partner and Grovyle being parallel characters, the partner essentially has the same good luck charm as Grovyle. Coming down to the beach at the beginning of the game, the partner notes that this is where I always end up when I'm feeling sorry for myself, and that coming here cheers me up. Even when the partner didn't have the courage to join the guild, the bubbles across the beach sunset anchored him, kept him cool, contained. When he returns to the beach at the end of the game, the partner reflects on how long it's been since he last watched the bubbles. It was a calming little ritual, an important piece of his life he had let slip away without realizing. Looking at the sunrise, the partner makes a rather incisive comment on the importance of such symbols and rituals. I didn't think that a sunrise could ever feel so renewing. The sun rises, then it sets. We take that for granted, and that's only natural. But things we take for granted, they're really the most essential things, and they're precious. The conversation has become self-fulfilling in a way. Ask any Explorers fan what their top 5 scenes in the game are. It is almost a guarantee this scene will come up. It's easy to see why. This is a decidedly odd scene, distinct in tone from most bits of dialogue not just in this game, but the entire franchise as a whole. And it couldn't prove the partner's point better, that out of all the scenes in the game, the one people remember most fondly are not the scenes with status quo altering plot twists or big climactic showdowns, but the quiet little character moments. Pokémon just doesn't do scenes like this often, and it's not until you're smack dab in the middle of one that you realize what you've been missing this whole time. It's often the littlest of details that add up to make an experience something truly unique, something greater than the sum of its parts. Who am I to disagree? After all, I argued something very similar in my Super Mystery Dungeon video. But focusing on the little details is always a double-edged sword, especially when the details aren't perfectly aligned. Explorer's plot can sometimes be a little muddled. For being the central MacGuffin, I'm not exactly clear on what the purpose of the time gears are, or why they would ever be taken away from Temporal Tower in the first place. Seems like a disaster just begging to happen. And what's up with basically everything related to the dimensional scream anyways? Explorer's worst narrative sin is by far its pervasive and incessant flashbacking. The flashbacks do their best to sabotage even the best of scenes, oftentimes presenting dialogue that happened literally only minutes prior. These flashbacks shouldn't be dismissed as an innocuous issue. They frequently disrupt the tone and pacing of the scenes. Here you are, invested fully in the heartfelt conversation at hand, when suddenly you feel the inescapable urge to roll your eyes as the game repeats dialogue you can very clearly recall every part of. Even the great sunset scene I just talked about has 2 needless interjections dropped in the middle of it, and this is far from an isolated incident. Explorers of Sky should take a page from the partner in Grovile's book and learn to gain some confidence, trusting that the audience will be able to follow along with the story and connect the dots themselves. Still, the point the game is making stands tall. While the biggest critiques are often found in the specifics rather than the broad strokes, it is undoubtedly the overlooked details that make Pokémon Mystery Dungeon so compelling. The sub-series contributes and expands the Pokémon universe in an interesting way because it places the Pokémon in a more unique genre setting than the main games. It is more straightforwardly and intimately about the Pokémon themselves, instead of implementing a degree of separation through a human trainer living in a metropolitan world. The Mystery Dungeon games are also just compelling in their own right, irrespective of the larger franchise. Whether that be its backloaded story structures, strangely satisfying sound design, groovy music, expressive character portraits, and yes, intriguing geological formations. The things we take for granted are precisely what cements the games we love in our minds. I'd say that's a pretty good way to describe the appeal of Sharpedo Bluff.